So I guess starting off is always tricky with this sort of thing, but maybe why theatre is probably a good place to start. What is it that draws you individually to theatre? What's exciting about the form for you? And why do you want to spend your life making it? Sophie's looking at you, Shane.
Okay, I suppose I'm a theatre maker. I became a theatre maker because it was the only thing I really knew how to do. I think I'd be a terrible plumber and a terrible lawyer and certainly a terrible accountant. I mean, for me, without kind of sounding like a kind of wispy thespian, I kind of I really strongly feel that theatre changes lives, and that it offers a really immediate conversation for really rich storytelling. For me, there's a kind of wonderful Australian theatre director called Neil Armfield, who's kind of a whole lot of extraordinary, and he talks about how theatre returns us to the old ritual form of storytelling, that it's the oldest kind of form of interaction where we can engage with who we are and be reminded of who we want to be, and it for me allows us that opportunity to kind of really reflect and be challenged about where we are at this point, in our own lives.
Yeah. Yeah, just what Shane said, really. But I actually had my very own life-changing theatre moment in here when I was 20 at Bash that Silo did, and I didn't really sort of know what to do with my life, and I came to see Bash, and there was something about how immediate it was and how direct it was, and I didn't understand why I was sort of a mess at the end of it. And
were you one of the people that got
yeah,
chosen to talk?
I was.
Yeah,
Mia. Yeah, and afterwards I was, it just totally undid me in every possible way. And then a few months after that, I applied to go to drama school because I didn't really know. Yeah, it's one of those weird experiences that you can't really figure out why it did what it did to you, but yeah.
Did you have a plan prior to then?
No.
Was there a different trajectory for you?
There wasn't any plan. No.
So you both talked about stories and the importance of storytelling and what you do. Are there particular stories that you feel you're drawn to telling, or that you feel need to be told more than others, and maybe that Silo has been a platform for that?
Well, I think personally for me, the kind of conversations that I'm interested in engaging with are ones that kind of revolve around the cultures of sexuality and race and gender in particular. I'm always kind of interested in the intersection between the personal and the political, and I think that if you were to kind of look back at the trajectory of storytelling that Silo's engaged with during my tenure, those are the kind of main facets of the I suppose the storytelling platform that we've operated in.
Yeah, I have sort of some similar interests in my own work, and in terms of sexuality, politics, gender, and I think I'm also really drawn to work that deals in some way with outsider or community. Just sort of looking at what I'm doing next year, there seems to be a lot of that going on. and work that plays with form in an interesting way.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I know that in your one of your particular drives, Sophie, is finding opportunities for up and coming and emerging artists to really have a platform to grow and create ambitious work and those sorts of things. Is that something that you share, or? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I think that Silo very much started as a platform for emerging talent, particularly under my predecessor, Sharon Duncan. I mean, she's responsible for the Paolo Rotondos and the Madeline Samis and the Tor Frasers of the world. And certainly when we first started, you know, Silo was engaged in a really rich conversation with Auckland Theatre Company's second unit, and out of that evolved the Mia Blakes and the David Van Horns and the Edwin Wrights and the Jared Larwadys of the world. And over time, I kind of begun to appreciate that, like, for me, talent expansion is it's a lifelong process. You know, that we shouldn't kind of pigeonhole emerging as a kind of label for 18 to 30-year-olds. You know, that Michael Hurst is still, you know, emerging. He'd probably hate me saying that. But, you know, we constantly change across our careers. I mean, I kind of look at who I am now as a 38-year-old artist and go back to the 18-year-old kind of musical theatre boy from Hamilton and go, that's kind of 15 whole conversations ago, you know, in terms of process and emerging.
Yeah, I think that when you look at particularly what Shane's done at Silo, yes, it is a lot to do with emerging kind of artists, but it's actually just my kind of understanding of a lot of what Shane did is that it's artists of all ages pushing through what you thought they were capable of doing, you know? Yeah.
Not limiting in
Yeah.
any way with the expectation. So we're starting to kind of move towards the, I guess we're talking a bit about process and a bit about values and those sorts of things. So in light of the theme of crossover, what ways do you think, obviously, did you spend some time together during this year as you kind of transitioned from one of you being the kind of artistic director to the other? And did you, through that period, realize some ways in which you're different, ways in which you're the same, and kind of in your process and in your decision making?
Yeah, it wasn't really a sort of a formal, I turned up, Shane gave me the book of how to run the company, you know.
I think that was the aspirational idea, wasn't it? And it didn't quite work out that way.
But it was, we just sort of both potted about in the office for a couple of weeks, really. And I think, well, partly a job like this that is a creative one, there isn't a rule book. And because it's so informed by your own artistic personality, Shane gave me lots of space to kind of make it my own. So he didn't say, this is how you do this. It was more a case of, when this happened, this is how I would deal with it.
I mean, you can't teach somebody how to be an artistic director or a leader. You know, I think leaders kind of identify themselves, and, you know, Sophie's clearly showed herself as being a leader, you know, even before she came to Silo. And so, I mean, you know, all I could gift Sophie with was you know, my historical knowledge, really, and you know, some odd tidbits like don't direct the June show because you'll be writing your Creative New Zealand application, and that's a really horrible time to be doing both at the same time. Yeah. Is
there an overarching kind of learning that came out of your tenure, Shane, that you think is kind of a summary of some of the key learnings? Or is there something, Sophie, that you kind of learned from Shane in that period of time that really struck you as being the product of 13 years in that position and really couldn't be learned any other way?
I guess the thing that I've learnt from, or the thing that Shane has encouraged in me, is to be brave in the way that I choose to lead the company, because obviously they're quite big shoes to fill, you know, so that's quite daunting when you step into a role like this. And it was a real gift for Shane to go, don't feel like you have to replicate anything that I've done, you know, make it your own.
I mean, whether you're leading as a company or actually just creating art, you know, you've got to be brave enough to kind of fuck it up. You know, I look at my career, and you know, the times when I've actually had the most experiential learning was from the times that were hardest. You know, there are obviously great, projects which are, you know, jewels in the crown and really exciting, and you look back on, with great fondness. But actually, the darkest times and the hardest times are the things that you learn about yourself from. You know, an old friend of mine once threw me. You know, I'm not a kind of a person that grabs at proverbs or things like that, but he kind of he said, you sharpen your axe on the hardest stone, and I think that's really true, you know, and I think that, you know, it's certainly one of the things that I've really loved about seeing Sophie's trajectory as an artist over the last, you know, however long, is that she's brave enough to kind of put herself out there and kind of flounder and fall, and that's okay.
So, with the knowledge that as time progresses, you will kind of learn things and change the way you think about things. At the moment, though, is there a snapshot of what your vision is, or how you kind of see Silo, what you see Silo achieving in the coming sort of midterm?
There is, but I can't really tell you what about that yet. Yeah, I am about a week away from announcing the season. So, yeah, it's tricky because I can't really talk about it very much here. But, yeah, it's been interesting sort of because I programmed the work back at the start of the year, and now looking at it all together, I'm sort of making a whole lot of connections between the work and starting to see why I've programmed what I've programmed. Because at the time I just was sort of in a blind panic, you know. But now I can go, oh, okay, I understand what it is that I'm trying to say or do over time.
Is it kind of the accumulation of a long-standing wish list, I guess? You know, is this a program that has been brewing in your mind for some time, even prior to taking over the role?
It's not. Elements of it are, but no, it's not sort of like, here's all the shows I've ever wanted to do, you know. It's not.
Blow your load all in the first 12 months.
No,
yeah.
no.
It's going to be a year of Tennessee Williams.
Oh, I wish.
Yeah. You've just ruined all the surprises, Shane.
No, I feel like it's lots of little beginnings of things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Are there any questions in the room that anyone has kind of burning inside them that they'd like to ask or hear about from these two? Sure.
Shane, right at the start you talked about the reason that you love theatre is the capacity it has to change lives. And I wondered if you are kind of thinking about that change from a particular person's perspective. Like for you, is it really centred from being a practitioner and the change that it has in your life, or is it more about the audience?
I think it's both. I mean, there are times when conversations have unexpectedly revealed themselves to me, and I've kind of had my, I suppose, prejudgment of people kind of realigned. You know, I did a play probably about 6 years ago called Holding the Man, which was about the early years of the AIDS epidemic, and the first half of it was really kind of rambunctious and ribald and kind of quite filthy, and with lots of coarse language and carry on. And I was sitting next to a woman who would have been in her mid-60s, and I immediately kind of wrote her off and went, "Oh God, she's a subscriber. She's not going to cope with this. She's going to hate this. She's going to leave at interval." And she sat there in kind of stone cold silence throughout the first half, and I kind of went, "Oh, well, she's not going to be there when we return," and she was. And towards the end of the play, when one of the characters is kind of in hospital, dying from AIDS. There was a moment where Alison Bruce, who was playing the mother, came in and stroked her son's forehead and just exhaled and went, "Ah." And this woman next to me just started shaking uncontrollably, and I kind of sat there and went, she's sitting here having been through that. You know, she's sitting here having a conversation with her dead son through this play, and this sitting in this theatre is an act of remembrance, and that was extraordinarily powerful for me, because it kind of taught me that, you know, you can't ever make assumptions about people and why they come and sit, you know, in this communal space to go on this journey. And that, you know, I now go and sit in a theatre and look at people and wonder why they're there as a result of that. And so, you know, that piece of storytelling changed her, but it changed me in a kind of really remarkable way and really unexpected way.
Awesome. Any other questions from the room?
Jane, are you very much the founder in many ways of Silo, having grown it? Has there been anything in particular that's been hard as a founder with the past song to someone else?
Weirdly, no. I mean, I think it was my leaving the company was quite a long time coming. You know, I made the decision about 2 years before I actually left, and kind of toed and froed from that before I kind of, Oliver made me go and talk to Jess and tell her that I was doing it, having not had that conversation for about 6 months. But from there, you know, I think, you know, I really trust Sophie, and I really trust her to have a new conversation with the company, and that to me feels, you know, it feels really empowering, you know, for me, in terms of that legacy, that, you know, she's not going to just, you know, provide business as usual, you know, that she will kind of reshape the conversation for Auckland as it shifts and changes. I mean, you know, where Auckland is at right now to where it was, you know, when I first came here in 2001 is, I mean, it's a totally different environment, you know, and I feel like the company's in really safe hands.
Off the back of that, Sophie, is there a particular opportunity that you see in Auckland, whether it be Silo's opportunity or opportunity for theatre in general, that you think is really exciting, or something that you see emerging that you think is really exciting?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time for theatre here. I feel like there's lots of great emerging stuff happening, like in this space, and then there's Auckland Theatre Company, who are, you know, over there, and then there's this middle space where we kind of exist and some other people exist, but that it's really hard to get from here. There's no sort of ladder, there's no trajectory, and that's really difficult. And I think that's where the challenges in Auckland are, is how do we support companies and artists to develop and actually manage to be sustainable in some way, because you've got all this kind of energy that burns hot in the basement quickly, but where does it go, you know?
Totally, a whole bunch of momentum, but not a lot of road.
Yeah, I think that's like the challenge for all of us in Auckland.
Do you think there's any clear solution to that that's emerging, or is that still undiscovered space?
I think there's some good conversations happening about it that I know I've had with people here at the basement, but I think it's about how do we all work together to support people coming through and give them the opportunities and resources that they need to get better, you know?
Totally. And that almost reflects back to that thing you were saying before, Shane, about emerging is actually something you do throughout your career, not just in the first 18 months, and then you should be on the road and home free. Are there any other questions in the room that anyone has?
Hello. When you talk about like what you want theatre to be, do you have any things that you don't want theatre to be, that you hate about theatre and that you don't want
When it's like television.
Yeah. I mean, I directed a play about 8 years ago that a very close friend of mine absolutely hated, and it was actually in this space. And he said, I don't go to the theatre to watch television, and I didn't realise that I'd made a piece of television, and it was the best and worst compliment I've kind of ever been given. Yeah, no, theatre is television, not so much.
Anyone else? Did I see a hand? No? There.
Of all the productions you've done over the past few years, which is the one that really will remind you of that's really changed you through these years, that's going to stick with you going forward?
I think there are productions that you learn a lot from, and for me, I did a play called When the Rain Stops Falling about 4 years ago, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, because of the calibre of the talent that I was working with. You know, the cast featured Jenny Ludlam and Peter Elliott and Stephen Lovett, and even though it was hard, it was kind of wonderful, because I felt like I was learning through that process of making, because I was being constantly challenged, and they were being constantly challenged, you know, and at the same time by the material. I mean, it's a kind of an extraordinary play, but we kind of had an extraordinary time making it. I mean, I think that there are, every now and then, there are pieces of work that you make where there's a kind of tacit understanding that there are people in the room that can do things that you can't touch, you know, that you can't better, and likewise, you know, I was in a play a long time ago now called The Boys in the Band, and it had eight other men in it, all of whom were wonderful actors, and you know, acting can be quite competitive, and you know, you'll be on stage kind of going, oh, don't do that, don't do it like that, no, and in this cast, we had an extraordinary time because we were looking at, here were 9 men looking at each other going, I can't do what you do. I don't understand how it is that you're doing that. But I know that on the flip side of that, you're looking back at me thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Exciting. I guess as a kind of I'm conscious that a lot of you have to be away at things because it's 9 o'clock and 9 o'clock is when things happen. But as a final kind of question, what's exciting for you at the moment? What are you both working on? Is there anything that people can come and see or get involved with?
We have a show opening here next Wednesday called The Blind Date Project, which I'm really excited about. And it's Shane's,
great.
The last show in Shane's program, and it is an improvised it's directed live. It's an improvised blind date between Natalie Medlock and a rotating cast of mystery dates every night. And we're turning this into a working bar. And it's going to be a really good time.
Amazing. So that opens on Wednesday and runs for
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
And I'm looking forward to seeing Shane in Jesus Christ Superstar.
Totally. Which opens
tomorrow evening
and runs for forever.
Forever. Until Christ comes back.
Fantastic. Well, I think that more or less brings us to the end.